Hi guys, Matthew from Warrior Pilgrim here, and it's a cold day. I want to talk about something that's cropped up very recently on the YouTube channels, and which does have a rather interesting link. You know me, always trying to link things to religion when I can. I recently watched some videos on the Klingon Bat'leth. Now, I'm not the world's biggest Star Trek fan. I haven't watched it much, and it was on before my time, so realistically I ended up watching more of Star Wars. However, the Bat'leth, even for me, is an interesting weapon. The bilateral sword, or the double-pointed, inward curving sword. Many people have said it's not a sword, but I think it's something that we should look into. Because interestingly enough, people have been debating about whether it's an effective weapon. Some martial artists say it is, some that it isn't. You get the idea. It's in discourse, no one really knows. Would it work as an actual weapon? That is something I think we should think of, because it has a rather interesting connection. Some people say because it has such ridiculous curves, every single movement you make is going to make it either fail or stick into something in the wrong way, so it can't make much damage. And whilst it can be an effective weapon in its own right, compared to everything else, it is really not that much better. So it can be an effective weapon, but not much against everything else. And apparently it doesn't even have any connections with real life weapons, so we can't really compare it to anything. However, since I'm also going to include at least some version of the Bat'leth into my fantasy settings, where I'm thinking of making it a dwarven weapon, because it's into the right size for them, making it more similar to a polearm, plus they'll have the metallurgy skills. I thought, why not look into it? So I watched those videos, and someone made a response to it. I don't remember his name, I'll see if I can show you the link. But he said that people were getting the Bat'leth completely wrong. He was saying that it was based on a scimitar rather than a sword. And whilst true, the general shape of the weapon did look similar to a scimitar if you turned it around, so I'd swing it like so. The moment you turned it around so the points are forwards, as was generally shown, it becomes, well, much less like a scimitar, in my experience. True, if you think of it like a scimitar, you can start using it more like a sword. For example, if this is the forward curving end, and this is the blade back up here, you can swing up into a version of, start from a version of Fool's Card, swing up to clear away a blade, and you're either already in a version of Ox, or you can simply push forwards, and that turns the parry into an effective strike.
This is Kitsune Club demonstrating the use of the scimitar and how that would in theory work with the Bat'leth, demonstrating the beveled edges on the outer curve. Now I'm not 100% certain that will be the case. Looking at this section, looks like there is indeed a cutaway that might potentially be either a false edge or potentially a bevel, but it's impossible to tell. The Bat'leth here looks like it could indeed have a bevel on the back. When it comes to the Bat'leth, it's near impossible to tell. This one says a toy. You can see a bevel. I don't know if that's just the foam. I don't know if it's the weapon itself. So based on the images, it's near impossible to tell. Here's another one that obviously has a bevel, potentially an edge, on the outer curve. And this is Kitsune Club demonstrating it again, showing how this on the Bat'leth would use that method. And that does make sense. Even if it was a false edge, it would flow quite nicely, using it to displace a weapon and then close in using the horns. And this is not something that is just done by enthusiasts. This is generally something from the TV show, not sure which series, but as a Vulcan demonstrating the same flow techniques that would be used with the Bat'leth, and you can see it's the outer edge doing all the work there. So even going through those motions, they're demonstrating how it can be transferred from a movement with the back edge into a movement with the spikes.
However, I see a couple of problems. Firstly, the movements are awkward, even with something that doesn't really resemble the Bat'leth. And secondly, I had to look deep into it in order to find any reference to it being similar to a scimitar. I did see one post that said it was a two-pointed scimitar, or double-ended scimitar, but as far as I'm aware, that is not how it originally was. And I had to look hard at images to see if the back edge, if the external curve had an edge. And it's very hard to tell whether that would have been a recreation, whether that was a particular Bat'leth used by a certain warrior, or if that was the original design. So I decided to delve into the actual physical origins of the Bat'leth. And I'm not talking about in lore, I'm talking about in the TV show itself. It turns out it's not based on a scimitar. It's based on deer horn knives, which are essentially two crescents with multiple edges. It's a rather nice thing, but here's the thing. I also looked that up. It looks like they have multiple edges on multiple angles. So it does indeed have an edge on the back end of the blade.
Here's a reference to the Bat'leth having, well, being described as a double-sided scimitar / hook sword. Let's take a look what that is. Deer horn knives, yes. So indeed, we do have them being described as inspired by the deer horn knives. Just to show the similarities, both have interesting curves to them. You can also see how tricky it is to tell which is simply a flat back or which one has a bevel to it. You can't quite tell with this one whether this spike is merely, well, you can see the medial ridge, but the top one you can't see whether that is the back or a sharp edge. So I'm pretty sure we found the inspiration for the Klingon sword, and as far as I can tell, the majority of deer horn knives do indeed have a sharpened edge on the back, as you can see there.
So his hypothesis that it does have a back edge and seems to be not only supported by the original lore of the weapon and some images, but also the original material that gave its source, that gave the blade its inspiration. It does look scythe-like, so it can be seen as a scythe, and I can actually see that working. scything away, and I've even renamed it in my stories, not the Batleth, but as the Grensfjord, or some of that, the grain sword. So, if you do take that, and even if you ignore the potential of the edge being on the back there, you can have a weapon that goes from the standard guards in HEMA, such as Fool's Guard, Ox, Vonpag, and in the version of Plough, or Flug, you can do some relatively effective things in these positions using these standard movements and a weapon with multiple points. It may not be as fluid, it may not be the same thing as a longsword, and realistically a longsword would be better in those situations, but you can pass it off. I sort of think of it rather like an axe, hence why I think a dwarf would have to use it more likely than a human. It isn't cross between an axe and a sword, because it's got the weight of an axe, so you can really throw it for a cut, and you'll allow some pretty much force, and could pierce armour if the points land correctly. But it's also got more blade to it, so it's more likely to cut on impact. Axe, you can get away with some movements that can deflect weapons and land strikes, or even hooking actions. As this axe shows, I can use some striking movements that will crack armour. I can do it in one hand, two hands. I can use the back of the weapon to knock aside a blow and then land my own, or in a fluid movement similar to a Batleth. I can start low, that is not a very good position for my weapon. I could chop back and round like so. This can be very clear a shield as well. But it's also got a relatively small striking area. This is just the cover. The blade itself is rather small. So even if you use hooking actions, it's still a small area to attack and strike with. And this is still a vulnerable piece of the weapon. It won't be sheared through without being braced and chopped at deliberately, which is very hard to pull off in battle, but it's still a weak point and will only get weaker as people strike it. So an axe, whilst an effective weapon, could still be an issue when compared to a battler, which, as I can demonstrate, this will have a broader blade, so everything's protected. My hands will be protected. I can block. I can still hook and entangle with the horns. Tie up, disarm, and if indeed this is a sharpened edge, I can do a strike like that to cut or even pierce through armour. A very good dwarven weapon. How does this relate to religion? As you know me, I always link it back. Because even if you think it seems ridiculous, going back to origins and basics will tell you a lot. And actually explain way more than if you just think, oh, that looks like this, or it sounds like this. The story of Noah and the Ark, that, in my mind, is very much an oral story. I use my training under Sarah Rundle and my good friends at Tales for the Heart to inform me on how it sounds and what that story is designed to convey. It gives expansive details that people will be interested in, broad descriptions, and it will alter from time to time and go back throughout the years. The only reason we have a seemingly rigid version is because we've written it down. Similar, if you will, to this. We see people swing a weapon in a set manner, and we think, yeah, that's the way it is, so how does that even work? And we compare it to what we know, and it just doesn't make any sense. The moment we consider that the method they're using might be either staged or simply flourished and practiced, and look at the origin of it, we start to see all manner of things come to pass. We can see it being effective in a wide variety of situations. Whether that will work, I honestly don't know. You can throw and strike. Now, another one I was thinking of was the fifth commandment, I believe it was. Honour thy father and thy mother. Many people say it doesn't give us anything if it doesn't work, if they're being terrible people. However, the term honour in Hebrew, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, has a root in the term secure. Honour doesn't mean to lift up or venerate. It means to hold, to be firm, to be grounded. And if you say base your fighting style on your footwork, then you get an awful lot more out of it. If I just start swinging this around, as you can see, it's not really working well. But if I start basing it off my footwork, as you can see, it's my body moving and my weapon flowing with me. Might not be true swordsmanship, but it is my body movement and my footwork that really helps me survive. So even if my strike doesn't work out, I can still remove myself from the situation. And the same is true across martial arts. Footwork is the basis of all fighting styles, even groundwork. You just didn't know how you're going to land, how you're going to roll. In archery, even, if I can grab a bow, I probably won't string it. I always tell people, stand on the line before you even reach for your arrows. Make sure you stand close enough to your arrows. You can just grab them like that and load. I know full well that you can twist in all manner of ways whilst holding the bow. But as long as your feet are firmly planted on the ground, little can go wrong. If you're turning to talk to a friend over there, yes, you can put your bow down the line, but that's a weaker position. If you try turning that way as it was going on behind you, yes, that's a more dangerous position because when you pull back, your arm has a bit more length to go. It's actually a more powerful draw, but it's much harder to pull off, and you need to really twist your body to make it work. But if you're standing in one position with your arrow pointing down the range, the head can turn right and left, and everyone's safe. Even in horsemanship, knowing what your horse is doing to the point where you can trust them to be your feet is more important than what your sword is doing. In fact, possibly one of the many reasons why the kite shield was so effective was because it covered the side that the horseman didn't want to be attacked on. part of his skill is to ensure that all his attacks would be coming from the side he could defend with his sword. So, as you can see, some strange things do crop up, which some people might think, oh, that's rubbish. But if you're able to find the ways in which that weapon works, and more importantly, base it on something that is grounded in its own history, you can see how it works for all. Same is true of religion. If you don't understand something, look at where it comes from. Look at the basis of it. Look at the words. Look at the position that gives you. If you ground yourself in that position, you'll be amazed at how strong it is. If you're wondering about that grounding thing, with honour thy father and thy mother, you're grounding yourself in the traditions, or even the teachings of the Christian church, or even the Jewish tradition in those days. You're grounding yourself in God. If they are not being good people, they're not being godly, you need to ground them. So it's not honour as in lift up, it's honour as in secure and make sure they are godly. So remember that. Stay humble, stay safe, and God be with you, my friends.